We didn't discuss who was going to start, but hey,
I don't know. Who
I
starts these things? You do, or
don't
that?
know.
I don't know. I press record, so that'll work.
You did the techie stuff, which yeah, that's
Yeah.
more than enough. It might when I touch stuff like that, it goes wrong these days.
Mm.
I've been out of IT for far too long. Yeah,
Well, my IT skills are turning it on and off again. So then, yeah.
made a career out of that, so don't knock it.
Well, you can make a career out of taking pictures of random objects and calling them whatever you want. I suppose that is that an influencer? I'm
An
not sure.
influence, yeah. You just
Anyway,
like an upcoming
uh,
social media thing,
so
showing our age there.
so we were just for the benefit of the listeners and the viewers, although we won't get into voices and faces, radio and TV, as we were joking about earlier.
We were.
We were just talking about some of the latest developments in the consulting world and what it means for teams. And there's these two big companies, which we won't name, but everybody knows who they are, coming out with new models and new matrices and new things like that, right, Colin?
It's a pattern you see. I saw it in companies. Every 5 years, the same ideas will come back around with a slightly different spin. Which let's try outsourcing, let's try insourcing, let's try these things, but a different
Mm.
spin will be put on it. And the people who've
Mm.
been there think, oh, I've seen this before, and it happens. It happens in the consultancy world. It happens in the product world. The
Mm-hmm.
same ideas get rebadged. If you're lucky, they get rebadged. So at least there's an attempt at making them seem different. I
Mm.
think sometimes some companies are just lazy these days and just, yeah, let's do this. We've been doing this for the last 50 years.
Mm.
And I think one of the big reports came out a couple of last week, the Gallup State
Mm-hmm.
of the Workplace International Report 2023. I can't remember its proper title, but it's a huge report which basically said things are getting worse. If you're lucky, they might have stayed the same, or a marginal statistical point of
Mm.
you've gone from 8% disengaged to 9% disengaged. As though that was a thing for celebration. But on the whole, things are getting worse in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And the response, the conclusion was, let's do more of the same stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. We'll work harder and we'll
Yeah,
work harder and we'll work harder. And instead of there's that cliche, isn't there? There's always like, don't work harder, think smarter, which really just makes me upset with people when they say that, which is why I've just said it, obviously. But what I was thinking on there was that you can reinventing the wheel, right? There's so many people who are going to reinvent it, but it's still a wheel. If we want to look at these disengagement, or rather, sorry, these engagement surveys or involvement surveys, um, there's also the level of honesty that people have, and the kind of fear in the workplace of retribution. You see it everywhere. With whistleblowers become the ultimately the victim, or the blame game and everything else happens. So there's also this kind of culture of how valid is that data. So that's one aspect to say, well, we're absolutely fine in our little, give myself a hug and I'm fine in my protective bubble because I'm fine that way. I don't believe the results because people lie, or people are not as honest as they should be. I understand that. So the solution is to go to a big consultancy company and give me a prescription for fixing my problem, which is a bit like going to the doctor and asking for antibiotics without knowing what it is that the antibiotics are trying to treat. We just know that antibiotics are good. Well, actually, not really. What we've got to do is we've got to figure out, because they kill everything. And what we've got to figure out is what is it that's actually wrong? And I was thinking, what is there? There's so many scientific ways that we can do this, and there's what's the shortest or the path of least resistance from a human being's perspective. And we could actually just go and ask, how are you? What's going on? We could spend time with our teams, and I don't mean one-to-ones and not team meetings and all of these things that, you must do 10 meetings a year because that shows you care, that sort of thing. What would be the solution to this disengagement? And unless you're actually going to be willing enough to sit down and listen to your teams, and that the information, when it's gathered or consolidated, doesn't go through these multiple layers of filters. Now, you know what I mean by that, right?
Yeah.
For the viewers, line of management who, for whatever reason, repackage, translate into nice corporately digestive words that will mean something to an executive, but absolutely the opposite or nothing to the person who just said it, right? So this translation is lost. So what we've got to do is kind of flatten that organization, not kind of, completely flatten that organization from a positional authority perspective, and just find out what's going on with those teams. Now, you've got all those indicators, right? You've got those indicators from the survey, and you can drill down into that data if you want. And what you could do is you could actually get out of your office and go there. You know, not make a big fuss about this person's coming, because then, you know, everybody goes around painting the grass green and all sorts of things, right? But go there and just sit down and go, what's going on? Not on a round table, not in a come meet the executive, we're all friends and trust, you know. Go there into the workplace, sit down with the people who are working and ask them, what's the biggest thing you're dealing with right now? What causes you the most anxiety? And write it down. Don't solution, just write it down.
It's one of the things that frustrates me in the kind of rolling out of solutions that you talked about, that we put more emphasis on naming the solution. So like you said, you go to the doctors, you got this, take this.
Yeah.
Because of the time frame, because of the pressure, or understandable context, but actually taking a moment to move beyond just naming the problem. The answer isn't to name the problem. The answer is to solve the problem, and it's solving the right problem. And quite often, you know, listening. Okay, I'll listen. I'll invest in listening skills. Now you've kind of missed the point. Just listen. Quite often when we speak to people, they say, well, yeah, the trouble is if I listen to my team, they'll raise stuff and I'll have to do stuff about it. And their brain's going, that's more stuff for me to do. That's extra work, probably extra cost. It's like, slow down. Like you just said, just write the problems down. In fact, I mean, you know, when coaching, when mentoring, when training, when just, you know, being a parent, usually the first problem that's surfaced is rarely the actual problem. Listening gives you the opportunity to get one of the skills that's rarely talked about is curiosity. It's not a skill, to be fair. One of the things that we should deploy and we don't deploy, we've actually been conditioned not to do it because we haven't got time. If this happens, do this. Is curiosity. Is that what you really mean? The big thing about the Gallup report, I started seeing it in loads of posts, was the engagement numbers are down. People's engagement with their job is down. And most posts in LinkedIn were saying, I'd love to understand what they mean by engagement. Just what does that word mean? You know, engage. And to be fair, if you dug through the report, there was definitions, but actually that word means different things to different people at different times. Some of it good, some of it bad. And if you sit there and listen to somebody who says, yeah, I'm just feeling a bit disengaged, I know leaders will go, okay, disengaged. Thanks for that. I'll see what we can do about that. What does that word mean to that person in that moment? And just unpacking that a bit is really helpful. And quite often it doesn't need necessarily, just doing that could lead to better engagement.
Yeah, but you know, that's difficult because then when you try to break down that emotion, it doesn't fit the survey, does it? Because then you can have so many decision elements to that decision tree that makes up the survey in the first place. So, you know, I can understand why, that's messy and it's complicated. So what we're looking for here is a survey result. And that's kind of that's really the wrong reason for doing the survey in the first place, right? It's kind of, I've done a survey, you know, but also I would like to know, what is that 1%? What's in that 1% compared to last year? What is that? Is it I'm bored at work? Is it I don't have a career path? Is it I've got crippling anxiety and stress and burnout because of my job? Is it what is that? Because the gravity of each one can't just be kind of marked up to a rounding in a spreadsheet that gives me the 1%. Because 1%, well, what's 1%? Not a lot, or it depends on your perspective, right? That is a lot.
Definitely. And I bet you'll have seen this as many times as I have when you do these kind of, okay, so we've got our teams are more disengaged, we've got the survey results. That then gets passed up the chain. So the executives sit there and look at it. Usually gets passed to HR to do something about it.
Yep.
Assumptions then start to creep in. Their context creeps in, not the context of the people who were replying to the survey that were sharing their experience, but a different context gets put on it. And then solutions get passed down. Okay, we've heard you disengage, so we're implementing work from home Friday afternoons. Okay. Just that disconnect is, we see these kind of things as ways to connect, but then we immediately implement disconnected solutions as a result. It happens all the time. Yeah. We're listening to what you're saying, and we decided this is what we're going to do about it. Well, surely you attempted to shrink the distance between, don't want to get caught up in hierarchy and structures and all that kind of stuff, but generally you're trying to shrink the distance between decision makers and the people who make sense of what's going on. And then to implement the solutions, you immediately expand that back out. And actually, what if you actually started to find a way to shift the decision making down to the same people who were making sense of what was going on? And that's kind of not necessarily talking about flat structures. That could be a way to do it.
Sure.
There are all sorts of ways to actually autonomy, blah, 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 blah. But the immediate thing with these results is, right, let's break back out again. Let's disconnect and implement solutions to make us look good, that we're responding rather than actually listening and eventually doing what really matters.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. I can understand why that happens. It is not pleasant to deal with unpleasant things. And, you know, we want to live in our illusions and our comfort zones where everything's okay, because that's what we want. Our brain mix is hardwired that way. We want everything to be okay.
But is it okay? But ignoring that is
not
okay
I mean, either, it's okay because I know it's there, but I'm just going to ignore it. So it's fine. Fine or okay. Those are kind of really powerful mindsets to have in a not brilliant way. But when I was coming back, talking there about this kind of, the layers or the distance between, let's use it in a businessy term, right? So from the operational element to the strategic, there's this gap. So we employ a whole load of people here whose pretty much responsibility is to translate this strategy, mission, vision, all this stuff into day-to-day operations for these people to get on with it. So they understand how their work contributes to company success and vice versa, right? So if we're spending our entire time trying to translate that, i.e. make that distance smaller, easier, faster, or rather more productive, more effective, efficient, whatever you want, right? Why then, when it comes to the topics which are the most important for the people who are delivering your strategy through operations, do we not translate it back the way? Why do we immediately go, okay, listen, then and run away and produce some action plan, which is actually, it's not fair to say it's an HR action plan, but it's always somebody in human resources that gets assigned it or dumped on, whatever way you want to look at that from a perspective, to fix something that they can't fix.
Yeah, but that's exactly what the conclusions on the report said was here's some insight, continue deploying solutions in the same way, because we've associated leadership with decision making. And it's also, I think people see it as, well, I'm paid to make the decisions. I don't know how to make them. I don't know what the right ones are, but I'm paid to do that. And I've created an expectation that that's what I have to do, either internally, and it's something I believe, or actually we've worked that way for so long to go to my team and say, I'd like you guys to help decide what to do. They'll look at me and go, that's what you're paid to do. If we do that and get it wrong, you're just trying to shift. Like, there's all sorts of complexities and relationship stuff and things like that. And that's reality. There's no getting away from that. But if you want that to change, and that's the only way, again, sounding like a broken record, but if you don't change that, the results will keep getting worse. You've
Yeah,
got to break that cycle somewhere, and it is breaking the cycle. It's pattern interrupts. It's painful.
what is it that it's David, bless him, who's not here today. He's busy
With the
elsewhere.
Yeah, busy with the police. Okay.
Yeah. What was it he says? You can't solve today's problems with the mindset that created them in the first place. Is it?
Yeah,
Paraphrases Einstein.
He
Anyway.
tends to riff off. Is it Einstein's quote about definition of insanity is just
Yeah. So it's kind of.
He puts his own spin on
But
that.
it is absolutely true,
Sweet.
right?
Yeah.
It's like I thought about it and now I'm here. So the solution is to think about it some more the same way to solve the same problem. Oh, look, the same result. So we'll do it dramatically differently then. I remember standing in a town hall listening to a very inspirational speech talking about how the results were not as they should be. And to get them as they should be, the mission was, or the challenge was, I think he used challenge, can't remember. Anyway, to do things dramatically different. That was the guidance. And it was like, okay, so dramatically different doing something would be not doing something. And it wasn't until later on in my career I reflected on the kind of, it was a good statement to make, but there was no follow-up behind and what that means for anybody and what good looks like or feels like. No why. I mean, we knew why. I mean, the numbers were falling, faster than falling down faster than in a waterfall. And what we wanted to understand was, what do you want us to do dramatically different? That's like asking people to stop thinking the way they think and think like somebody else. No wonder the end result is, oh, look, 3 months later, the numbers are way worse because everybody started to do things dramatically different. They stopped following processes because they said do something different. No concerted effort, no focus areas, nothing. It just turned out to be chaos. So the value, there's that word, the value and the value proposition of your organization is all about the value that the people provide. And the people who provide that value are the people in operations who are doing the job. And if you're not going to listen to them, doesn't matter what you say, there's no point to do an engagement survey or a survey that asks how you're feeling, because that's all it does. Do you trust your manager? I'm going to tick yes here because my manager is going to look at the report. Because in the root cause analysis and HR response and everything else, the task will be given mandatory to all the line managers to sit down with their teams and go through their individual results. How is that safe and a free environment to talk about what's wrong? It's not. That safe space we talk about all the time has to be created by the people in the team because they are the team, and the manager or the leader or the positional authority title has to realize that it's not their team. That's my team. No, it's our team. You're in that team, not separate from it, not leading it. You are part of it. And the only difference is the level of responsibility and the tasks you've got, which, funnily enough, for everybody in the team is different levels of responsibility and different levels of tasks, right? The only thing you've got there is this positional, well, you get this flag in some companies that say, hey, I'm a manager. I kind of, when I think about manufacturing firms, I mentally picture a man or woman walking around the factory floor with a flag stuck in their back.
Yeah.
That's the leader, follow
me. Yeah, well, I've been
do on the city tours, with the umbrella, follow me.
Yeah.
So and so I just wonder, how much did that cost to do that survey? How much did it consume? How many hopes did it get up? How many enthusiastic people willingly filled it in honestly? And now the result is, well, we're going to keep doing the same, which ultimately is, I'm not going to do anything to change your current circumstance. And I know that it's not all on the companies to do that. It's a 50-50 split between employee and employer. But I just feel like it's completely unbalanced. But again, it lets me look at something, say, I've done that engagement survey, those are my results. They're better than my competitors, so everything's all right, so I can focus on these other things.
It's a posh tick. It's just a bigger tick box exercise. That's all. It's just another version of, I've done these three. Instead of doing one step, I've done 3 steps.
Yeah.
And now I can move on to the things.
And we'll
my emails full up.
Or we'll change reporting lines. We'll move solid line reporting locally, and we'll dotted line out will stay out, but we'll have a solid, and that changes the matrix, the RACI matrix, right? It changes all of that, but all it does is confuse the staff members. Like, hang on a minute. So if I talk to you about holidays and everything else before, now I talk to you about business results, and I talk to the person in another country about holiday results, or I'm confused. Who approves my day off? It can be that simple. It's great at that level where you're moving dashboards and spreadsheets and other things around. That's great, but again, the impact on the operations.
Well, again, it's that desire, the belief that once we've named the solution, that it will work.
Yeah.
And actually, the reality is, and again, take some bloody pressure off yourselves. Figure out, actually, you know what? Reporting lines are a bit confusing. Let's try doing this for a month, for 4 weeks. Let's try, I'll talk to you about this and I'll talk to you about that, and we'll do this. And then at the end of the month, we'll get back together and see what worked, see what didn't work, and tweak off the back of that. There's this weird belief that we have to implement something and it needs to work. And I'm not saying you should intentionally implement things are going to screw stuff up. But actually, we do it with technical stuff. We do it with product development. We do it with service development. I think the world has started to get the concept that you need to take risks to fail, because that's where you learn. But particularly where people stuff are concerned, if you look at the whole flexible working, I'm using air quotes, but the whole flexible working, we need to decide whether we're going to work from home on Thursdays, 2 days a week, in the office. Try something. Instead of let's get everybody back in the office, how about, look, we're not sure about this. We've got some thoughts. We think this might be better for us, but we don't know. Let's explore that. Let's put an experiment in place. What do you think? Let's come up with an experiment we think together has got the best chance. Try it, reflect, take what worked, throw away what didn't. Where you've still got questions, try something else. And quite often also, again, we mentioned the word context before. What worked 10 years ago may not work today, not because it's not the right thing, but because context has changed.
Yeah. And that's when I was in a different country with a client last week, and it was the first month of 6 months together, where we're talking about different perspectives and looking at context, and quite a lot of the participants were talking about the tools of leadership, and that's good, because the tools of leadership are tools, and it's knowing which one to use when. We got into the argument about flat-headed and cross-headed screwdrivers, and it was like, at the end of the day, as long as the flat head fits in the cross screw, then it'll work. It won't be perfect, but it'll work, right? All we've got to do is do, or rather execute, and see, because most of the time it's your best guess, unless you've got a time machine. Now, there was a comment made that, but we work in this global corporation, so we can't just create whatever rules we want, and we'll be different to every other team on the open space. And I didn't really expect that comment. One, I was really happy that it came retrospectively, because, but it kind of shocked me. and I use that word shock deliberately. It shocked me. It's like, well, but why do you need to be the same? Because that's fair. No, it isn't. Now, don't get me started on the equity equal thing, but a blanket rule for everyone can't possibly be fair. So it's like, why don't you have a discussion with your teammates and decide how you're going to do things? Because that's what works in your team. And then when other people come to your team to join it, then here, by the way, this is how we operate. Want to add something to it? Any questions on it? Think about it. Let's have a thought. So this agreement relationship, I mean, it works the same way as any other relationship, that you rub off each other sometimes and it's uncomfortable, and you bump into each other, you argue, but there's this kind of core agreement that says, hey, we're not operating the way we should be here, or got a question. And if you're different because you're doing that, and then everybody else is kind of doing following the absolute routine process, which is fine and valid, but if you're doing it because that's following the rules, then that's compliance. Whereas the other one, that's involvement. That's, I have a say to it. There are always going to be boundaries, and there has to be boundaries. But within those boundaries, there's a lot that you can do that still gets the result, doesn't break any rules, but you're going, sorry for this cliche, you're going with people as opposed to pulling them or bullying or pushing them into it, right? Sorry, bullying is the wrong word, cajoling them into doing something, which no one likes, right? I don't like being forced to do something I don't like. Hey, do that, it's good for you. It doesn't feel like it.
That exploration of, you can get caught up in things like role and job, but that exploration of what's the best way we as a team can accomplish what we need to accomplish. I mean, you quite often talk about tools and processes and methodologies, but the people stuff has to be in there. When did some work with the Met Police last year, and it was one of the teams we worked with was a small team, specialized team, and one of their team, she was the one on the team that, I won't say enjoy, but she was fulfilled by the element of going to people and giving them bad news. When something bad had happened, she actually didn't like it, but she liked being there for the public, being there for that on that personal, intimate. She liked that bit, and the rest of the team were like, we don't. So she was quite happy. Not, you know what I mean. But that part of the job, I'll do that. But as we were working with them, it came out just through chatting, and as they felt safer and they felt I've been doing that for a year now, and I need a break. And the team's response was, yeah, sorry, we got caught up in, because you said you liked it, originally, and we're happy doing it. We've got used to doing it. Letting, you doing that and us not doing it. Now you've raised it. Of course, for doing that solely in the team for a year, of course you'd be,
a bit drained. I mean, that, I know what you're talking about there in the specific context, but I mean, that is a hugely demanding role of delivering bad news, and it's not liking that. I think being fulfilled, knowing the context and a little bit about
she got real meaning from that element of it.
Yeah, that person wanted to make sure that was done in the most respectful way. That was, it's not about her, it's about the people she's informing, to a standard which she holds herself personally accountable to, which is way higher than the minimum standard is absolutely required, right?
But if you break that down from an HR and a fair perspective, that responsibility was on everybody's job profile.
Sure.
But the team came up with a way for them to adapt it. But then also contextually, they eventually got better at discussing, is this still the right way as a team? We want to accomplish this goal of the team. And that's how you break it down. That's every techie needs to do 3 hours of coding a day. Every techie needs to do 2 hours of testing a day. Whatever the job responsibilities are, there is, as you say, boundaries. There's so much space within those boundaries for you to discuss and get involved in how to execute those things in a way that works for you as a team. And if there is something where you all go, none of us want to do this, what's going on there then?
Yeah. Do we need to do it?
Do we need to do it?
And then
Have
we
we got a
suck it
gap
up
in the
and we get on
team?
with it, and we find a solution to how do we sort of share the pain there.
Is there
But
another team? And so on and so on. So again, just
this is
listening and raising ideas is really important.
this is where, I was trying to explain to this group that, and they are a group. There'll be a team probably in a few months with the not very easy tasks they've got to do. But it's not easy to create a team. And they're still under the impression that it's me creating the team for them. They'll learn that they're doing it for themselves.
Yeah.
And so trying to explain that this is again, the cliche, the living document, right? The living agreement. It's just, and my son actually inspires me on this one. He's 4.5, because that half's important when you're 4. And he says to me that I don't want to do that. I was like, but you like doing it? Yeah, but I just don't want to do it. Well, come on, you'll like it. I just don't want to do it. And we get kind of caught up in being adults and forget that children, mini humans, only difference, size, and experience. That's all. Brain function, the same. Just because you like doing something doesn't mean you're in the mood for it at that particular time. And usually when you have to force doing something, it's not always brilliant. It's uncomfortable, and the result is usually, nah. But sometimes if the result's nah, and it's still a result, then all right. So we have got to review. How do you review something? You talk to each other and you say, can you do it this week? I'm not feeling great. Sure, I'll pick it up. And I'm consistently amazed, astounded, there you go, where some keywords there, word of the day dictionary I swallowed this morning, where we do this in our personal lives a lot, in our social engagements. It's like, you want to go to that? Let's go to that party. Nah, don't feel like it. But you like parties, don't feel like it. Okay, let's not go to that one. Okay, change the word party to go to that meeting. Don't feel like it today. Okay, then I'll pick that up. I'll deal with that. You go. But it's because it's in everybody's job description that they must absolutely do that. And then we get into the performance criteria where you're compared to others, relative performance. This person's better at this and this. And we get so hung up on this contradiction of my team is performing, my relationships in the team are healthy, my relationships with the supervisor who's going to be writing my performance review is balanced and healthy. They know my preferences. They know what I'm exceptionally good at. They know what I'm not so good at and why, right? Because naturally, we're not going to be good at something if we don't like it.
Yeah.
Because we won't put the willingness and the effort into it. Or rather, we'll put the minimum required into getting it done. So,
the risk with that is isn't it, is that then becomes habit. I've done that thing I didn't enjoy doing. I have to do it again. I have to do it again. I've done it again. And before you know it, the enjoyment that you ever had, or the benefit, or the outcome, or the impact that it ever had gets lost because you just got used to doing it rote as habit. It's lost its meaning. And actually, sometimes the value in saying, it's a balance. It's not saying, you can't just not do stuff you don't feel like it all the time. Again, kids can get into the habit, but at quite this, no, you've got to tidy your room. You don't want to, but we'll help. We've offered that, So there is a time but approaching it in a different way to see what that brings. It's useful. There is times when I don't feel like it. That meeting I don't think is useful for me, but actually you might get some value out of it because it'll expose you to different people. And it's not trying to sell it or trick people into going, but actually there are different ways of achieving the same goal. And as a team, just finding ways to involve each other. What we do, where most bureaucracy comes from in organizations, which is one of the biggest problems to any kind of progression, is somebody has inflicted something on somebody else. I want you all at this meeting for this reason. I want this form filled out in this way for this reason. And then that reason gets lost to time.
Yeah, it
or
becomes
it
a
becomes habit to keep that reason because I said I needed it, and I can't remember why. But if I back
yeah,
down, I'll
yeah.
look weak or ineffective or whatever.
Mm.
Or, this department won't have a reason to exist if we take away all those forms. Okay.
Which, I mean, that department probably, it might not need to exist, or it might not have even been about the forms. We're also, we're talking about habits and routines a lot, and the triggers of what is it that creates the habit. And I've used this in the business context. Somewhere, at some point, someone's going to phone you up and ask you a favor.
Yeah.
Because they need your help, right? And because you're supposed to be helpful, resourceful, and competent, yeah, help. I don't know, let's say you produce some information that's non-standard. And then that's good. And your internal client who asked you, right, liked it. That was good. And then like maybe next week or next month, hey, you remember how you did that for me last month? Yeah. Could you do that again? Sure. Because, I'm being helpful and competent, and my client really likes it. So I'm gonna, because, it's good to have good clients. It's good to keep clients happy, right? Yeah. So we do it. Month 3, same thing again. Month 4, where's that report? What report? Yeah, the report you've done for the last 3 months. Yeah, but you didn't ask me this month. Yeah, I know, but I need it. Oh, okay then. And suddenly that favor becomes a task which your team isn't paid for, staffed for. No one's aware you're doing it. Your KPI dashboard will be completely unforgiving that you're doing it, because it will show orange or red because you don't have enough time to do what you're supposed to be doing, right? It's where we dug down into the rabbit hole of utilization. And it's like, started on utilization stats because they're wrong. Your teams are always doing more than the utilization because they're helpful and resourceful. And I don't mean, that coming from a Scottish person, right? Let's not get into this cliche, because I could see you're thinking that there, right? But we don't do anything without getting paid for it. That's not what I mean. I mean, this is a discussion that says, look, if I did you a favor a couple of times, but if you want this to be a standard thing, then we're going to have to talk about charging, because we don't have enough capacity to take on extra work, because we've already, in every team already got an absorption target. It's called productivity. Whether your team's got a productivity target or not, it's called stretch targets. What we want is to get more out of you for the same price. And that's good business practice. But as soon as you start taking more and more and more on that no one knows about, then if I'm sitting in my spreadsheet world looking at utilization there is down, then I could put that there. And if I actually went there and saw that the team was stressed, beyond belief, people are missing, people are quitting, people are leaving, can't get a backfill because of whatever hiring freeze or whatever, then we've just gotten ourselves into a real hole there, and that's where it manifests into the disengagement results. That 1% is actually a team that's burned out because they were being helpful and high performing and didn't feel that they could have a conversation that says, okay, to do this, need more resources. Can't pay for those more resources. Then, sorry, gonna have to go with the standard that everybody else is getting. And if you want the non-standard, then we can create a business case around it and ask for, well, the answer will be no. Then that leaves us back to the standard report, right? But it's having that conversation is remarkably difficult for some people, because I talked about the superhero leader.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the mythical client who is all seeing, all powerful, all knowledgeable, and absolutely cannot be upset at any time. The service industry, the customer's always right. Well, actually, now it's the client's always right. No. These are just personas that we create for ourselves. The service delivery mechanism, the service recipient, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, it's a human still that is the receipt that makes the decision of whether this was good or bad. You know, so what do you want? Do you want something that's consistently late and of bad quality, or do you want something that is good enough for the reasons you need it? It might be a little bit more time intensive for you to understand what you're getting, but that's what the service is paying for. If you want it more, then give me more staff and I'll put it on it. We don't do that. We don't do that at all.
I think that's the shift. When we talked about that kind of decision making and sense making and moving those close together, what happens then is decision making stops becoming a one-off. What happens in those examples you talked about there is the person asking for that one-off report. Well, I'm taking responsibility for saying, can you do it? But that's where the decision-making responsibility stops. It's not, it's a continual impact on that relationship. Positive, negative, it all changes, but it's a continual impact on that relationship, that process, that outcome. When you and when there's a distance between the decision-making and sense-making, the consequence of that is rarely seen or felt. When you bring those together, the consequence becomes more apparent and harder to ignore. I know we as a team said yes to producing this extra report on a weekly basis, but as a team, we're now struggling to deliver this other stuff because Susan's losing every Friday to this report. And Susan, we miss you. You know, we needed you on this other thing and we'd love to pull you in, but we can't. But it becomes it's the difference and it's the power of a shared responsibility, which gets people nervous. If you've got a shared responsibility, nobody's responsible.
But where's that in the RACI matrix? And is that the solid? That's the mindset that it shifts to. It's like, it's not in the RACI matrix. It's not a solid line. It's not a dotted line. So what do I do with it? Let's panic and freak out because the client will be upset. But well,
it just, and there's no one size fits all. You know, again, to some extent, I feel people's pain when I say what I'm about to say, because I know I roll my eyes sometimes, but it depends. What you do depends. There is no one size fits all solution. It depends on the people, the context, the work. You can produce frameworks and, like I said, boundaries within which that can work, but it will press against them. And when it presses against those, that's a great point to say, okay, we keep coming up against this boundary. We said we would engage this, we would talk about this in this way, but we keep hitting it. What's going on? We keep getting that same demand from that stakeholder about doing this. We keep doing a bit for them, but we keep getting it. What's going on? Have we missed a relationship with their team or the people they're delivering to? When I worked in IT, the number of cottage industries that existed out in, within different business departments, based on spreadsheets and access databases and God knows what else, the right intent behind them when building them, but it become, well, I'm in charge of this access database and these whole teams depend upon me. And you're sort of going, and then I'm afraid we're updating Microsoft Access and that stuff you're doing. Well, we can't do that. This won't work. Okay, we weren't aware of that. And if you'd have come and spoken to us, we probably could have done that in a couple of days. But this is 2 years down. So opening up those conversations and making putting the decision making closer to the people that make sense, but also feel the impact of it, has got to be the way to go. That's what's different, going full circle to the Gallup report. You can't just do more of the same stuff. We need better leaders who make better decisions. We need to, what was it you said? We need to do something dramatically different. But we need to think differently, not just do differently. And that thinking is constant. We need to constantly think differently. And that's where people get scared and tired. I just want to turn up and do the same.
And again, that's where the human brain element comes into, because we will do what mostly works. Especially when we're overloaded. When you're talking there about, the consequences, it's interesting. If you go back through any survey, it doesn't matter which companies produced the survey, there's no consequences in there. There's nothing documented. There's no case study. There's no, by the way, we dug into some of these results and this is what we found. And I think that for anybody in those companies listening, assuming, dangerous, assuming that the people who run those or who request those surveys actually want to know, go in there and find out what percentage of our staff in disengagement are disengaged because of, let's take an extreme example, burnout. Use that word because it's popular, right?
Yeah.
But I mean genuine burnout, not I'm tired this week or I'm feeling low and need a holiday. I mean genuine burnout because of work. What if you go in there and you have a discussion with that person and find out what's going on in the last year, it's usually a year, that has led to this? Do you mind if we can anonymize it but do you mind if we document that? And I think if you put that in front of people in that survey, what does the context, that's the context, right? Or rather the consequence of ignoring this 1%, I use that just because that's the example, are situations like this. There are always going to be people that go, yeah, that's not going to happen to me. That's not my organization. That's not who we are, blah. But is it? Because, you know, people who have accidents really didn't set out to have an accident today, did they? That's why it's an accident. Burnout and stress and anxiety and everything else, they might be isolated, but they're not accidents. They're patterns of behaviors and interpretations of behaviors that manifest in one or two individuals, but they're present in everybody who's involved. And who's involved? Everybody around is involved, knowing it or not. So, you know, we're not going to solve the world in 40 minutes of discussion, but as soon as you stop listening, as soon as you stop personal conversation and resort to emails, surveys, and cascading or broadcasting, you have disconnected from the human.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, when you and I are talking about those engagement surveys, I roll my eyes and try to laugh, because what a contradiction. I want to engage you to find out how you are and how things are, but I'm going to do it through a medium that's completely disengaging. And I know you can't possibly talk to everybody. I get that. I get it. But you've got a local organization that can talk to everybody because they're there. And that's a consolidation exercise. And I know you know how to do a consolidation exercise because we do that all the time, right?
One of the, you know, the teams we work with, it doesn't have to be the boss. You know, this kind of engagement stuff and listening, it's got nothing to do, yet we impose upon it this artificial hierarchy.
Yeah.
But there's always informal hierarchy within teams, but actually it's human beings listening to human beings, whatever the job title. And yes, that comes with its own context and implications, but talk in more conversations, more listening, more ideas being shared will lead to better things. All the teams we've worked with, when we talk about consequences with those teams, what stands out is when you get into what really matters, the consequences for them are, yeah, my marriage is better. I get on better with my kids, or my relationship with my ex is, it's stronger. Oh, and yeah, works better as well.
Yeah, because
my team, I've become friends with my team. It becomes an emotional consequence, which people are scared of. Sometimes it's I've moved on because I wasn't getting what I needed, and I've moved on.
Yeah.
That's all fine as well. But the consequences suddenly become something meaningful, and the work benefits.
I think one thing just to wrap up on in terms of consequences and stuff, it's goal setting time of the year, in some companies or mid-year
reviews
coming up. Yeah. And it's like, how do I set meaningful goals? I got this question a couple of days ago. Like, how do I set meaningful goals? And I'm like, well, meaningful goals for who? Because company goals are meaningful for companies and your position, right? Your position. But they're not necessarily going to be meaningful for you, all of them, maybe one or two. Development goals. This is where a lot of people get stuck on, what do I need to develop in? Like, wrong place to start. What do you want to develop in? Not related to your current tasks or role. Yeah, I want to get better at doing this. That's training and practice. That's fine. That's not necessarily development. That's more practice for the job you're in right now. But what do I want to develop in? What is meaningful for me? What contributes to my betterment, what that better is, and you decide that. And then all you got to really do is link that to your current company, not your current role.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say I want to get better at doing presentations. Okay, that's very vague.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what is it about presentations that make you think you're not good at them? What does that mean? I want to get better at introducing presentations. I want to get better at public speaking. Okay, how are you going to do that? And then when you're explaining that goal, you've got to think about, why should the company pay for it? If you were the company, why would you pay for that? That's the reasoning, the logic behind it. It's like, well, because if I'm better at what I do with more confidence and you're investing in me, the chances are I'll deliver better for you and I'll also stay longer. Probably, because it's not just one thing. So, business goals are really related to your position, your positional authority and the tasks that you have to achieve. And on the other hand, the development goals are usually kind of contradictory to that. And well, they are, because the business goals are related to you. A development goal is related to you as a human, not your position. And again, it's where this disconnection happens and the distance increases between knowing what the business is requiring of you and also knowing what you want to do in the future. And the future is also tomorrow or next week, right? It doesn't mean, what do you want to, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That cliche. I don't know. Ask me again in 4.5. So I think when we start looking at goals, business goals, that's one thing. When we start looking at our personal development goals, one of the most dangerous things we can do is link our self-worth to that goal, because a goal is just an arbitrary thing that we make up for ourselves. I want to develop. Well, what development? How are you measuring that development? Is it the number of times I've done it? Is it a feeling I feel better about doing it? Is it feedback from other people says you're getting better at it? What is it? It doesn't really matter what the measurement is. The fact is you look at it and say, well, I started and now I'm doing it more. And if I look at where I was this time last month and I see a difference in progress, it's called progress. Linking your self-worth to progress. That's where you're going to be feeling motivated and inspired about your own actions. As Mark Twain said, you have to start to achieve something. So you have to just start.
Yes.
Stop waiting for perfection.
Spot on.
Yeah.
It's probably another rabbit hole, but the traditional connection between self-worth and competence needs to be broken. It's not that you shouldn't be incompetent, but actually progress, growth, whatever buzzword you want to put on it, but that willingness to learn, willingness to reflect, willingness to make mistakes, to share that you were wrong and you've changed your view and all that kind of stuff. That's where self-worth comes from, not from I do this well, because then you become defensive. It becomes hard to break or to change for the right reasons, etc. So really spot on. Great example in the goals. And there will be so many people out there going, goals, I've named it, which is get better at presentations. Job done. And at some point,
because I don't have time for that.
Book presentations, top 10 ways to get better as a presenter, course booked, tick. So it's a cracking thing. Right. I think we've solved surveys.
What? Are we talking about surveys?
Oh,
I don't know. I'll send you one.
Send you a survey.
Survey. You can tell me what you think about it.
We'll publish a survey to find out what people thought about this and any suggestions for changing it.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Actually, I'm very curious to know what people looking at it will think. And so I'm looking forward to the comments. So if you're going to put comments in, make them constructive, please. Okay. Cool.
Thank you. Cheers, mate.
Bye.